Hey everyone, this is International Master Sham Demandarin, aka Hudinovic, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my first ever YouTube video, and I'm very excited to be doing the recaps of the World Chess Championship match. It's happening right now in Dubai between the challenger Jan Nepomniachtchi from Russia and the defending champion Magnus Carlsen from Norway. Today we'll be covering Game 5. The first 4 games have been drawn, and there are going to be 14 games in total. So without further ado, let's get into it. But before I forget, big shout out to Realistic Guy for putting together the awesome thumbnail. He's one of my Twitch followers, so thank you very much for helping me out with the thumbnail. Appreciate it a lot. So today in Game 5, Jan Nepomniachtchi had white. He also had white in games 1 and 3, and he stuck to the same move, e4. So as Bobby Fischer famously said, this is best by test. Bobby Fischer really liked to play e4 more than any other opening move. And just as in games 1 and 3, we have the same opening moves, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. This is known as the Roy Lopez opening, or the Spanish opening. And I'm not going to spend too much time on the opening. That's really outside of the scope of a recap video. Even a single variation can take hours and hours to get to really understand and analyze all the different variations. So I will be not spending too much time on the opening, but making important remarks when that you just can't ignore. So this is all the same as what happened in games 1 and 3. In game 1, Jan Nepomniachtchi actually chose h3, and eventually Magnus Carlsen sacrificed a pawn, and the game eventually petered out. There were some interesting moments, but just want to mention that h3 was the move played previously, and then Jan Nepomniachtchi chose a4 in game 3, and he actually got a pretty good position. In that game, Magnus Carlsen went with bishop b7, and eventually White got some kind of advantage. So I think, as most people predicted, Jan Nepomniachtchi would probably repeat this variation, and he did. But it was actually Magnus Carlsen that was the first to deviate. He played rook b8, and as I mentioned in the previous game, in game 3, Magnus Carlsen went for bishop b7, but here he decided to go for rook b8. And I think this, when I checked the database, also if you check the Lichess database, you can see that rook b8 is actually the third most popular move. So in game 1, in game 3, Magnus Carlsen chose bishop b7, which is close to the most popular move. The other move was b4, which is I guess the main move. Rook b8 is the third most popular move, but it's very infrequently played compared to the first two. So I think Magnus Carlsen was banking on this being some kind of surprise. But again, Jan Nepomniachtchi showed how extensive his preparation was, and he knew what to do here. So I think so far Jan Nepomniachtchi's opening preparation has been very impressive. Magnus Carlsen tries to choose some in all of the games. He tried to choose some less known lines. Maybe game 2 in the Catalan was the only game where Magnus kind of surprised Nepomniachtchi, but in all other 4 games, I feel that Magnus tried to surprise his opponent, but Jan Nepomniachtchi was that prepared that the surprise didn't really work out. So that's something to watch for. I think it's just very impressive to see. So Magnus chose rook b8, and immediately Jan Nepomniachtchi captures on b5. The point of this is that with the rook off the a file, White now opens up the rook and is able to control the a file, and that's sort of a positional plus there. The game continued h3, and d6, c3, b4. So these are all sort of normal moves. H3 played to guard against a potential bishop g4 in the future, and also the reason why white doesn't play c3 immediately is because black may sort of go back to one of the main ideas in the Marshall Gambit, which is to sacrifice his pawn. And one of the key points is that after, say, something like, and this, you can see this has been played many times, knight f6, the knight actually is blocked by its own pawn and can't develop. So by playing a subtle move like h3, white actually reserves the square for the knight. So in variations like this, knight e5, knight e5, rook e5, and if you try to do the same thing, I can actually get my knight out very quickly, and the position should be a much better version for white. So it's opening subtleties like these that really matter at the top level. So h3 is a nice move, and d6, and now he plays c3, because now black would be wasting an extra move to play d6, d5. So it's not as dangerous as if he played c3 2 moves ago. The argument is that h3 is a useful move for white, and it makes sense. So after d6, white plays c3, b4, and now d3. This is another very subtle move. Jan Nepomniachtchi is in no rush to go for d4. After d4, play might have continued take d5, but black gets sort of active, and white's probably still better, but black's pieces are somewhat more active than what happened in the game. In the game, Jan Nepomniachtchi played the more sort of cautious d3, but it's sort of and somehow turned out to be more unpleasant for black. So I would have to say, I think, and it, by the way, Nepomniachtchi was playing these moves very quickly, and apparently Magnus had his body language was sort of he was not happy. He thought that rook b8 would be a surprise, and when he realized that his opponent was well prepared, it had sort of a psychological effect on him. So just after a few moves played, let's try to look at what's happening in this position. One of the main points is that this pawn needs to be constantly protected. So white is attacking it with this knight. So for the moment, this knight is there, but it is sort of it's something that always needs a watchful eye. Whereas the e4 pawn is also attacked by this knight, but except white has two defenders. So somehow e5 is more of a target than white's e4 pawn. And the other thing is this c3 pawn is doing very well. It's guarding this key central square so the knight can never come in, and it's really restricting. Right, it's mainly restricting this knight. This knight is not well placed here. And the final thing is this bishop is super active. It's on a really nice diagonal, whereas this bishop, it could have been on c5 possibly, but because it's on e7, you can just see that white has a bit of a more pleasant position here. So now Magnus does what he does best, which is he tries to regroup his pieces. He understands that this bishop isn't doing anything, and he doesn't like the knight on c6, so he goes for this regrouping. He plays the bishop to d6 to defend this pawn, and also free this knight for a maneuver to the king side where it could be more useful. Now, Jan Nepomniachtchi played queen c2. It's an interesting move, and what you'll see in the game is that Magnus Carlsen played h6, and Jan Nepomniachtchi went for knight f1. But the natural question you should always ask yourself is, what was the point of queen c2? Was it really necessary? What if I just play knight f1 immediately? And I mean, we can check the Stockfish engine here, and it seems like a totally fine move. It's similar to what happened in the game, except you don't need to put your queen on c2. So I'm not exactly sure why the queen went to c2. Okay, I think he never actually ended up doing this in the game, but in some lines it supports c4, c5, and that was one of the big questions after the game is why Jan never went for the c4 c5. It would have made queen c2 make more sense. So in that case, some of his play was a bit inconsistent. Queen c2 was maybe it really only made sense if he played c4 c5. But since he never did, maybe he didn't need to play this move. But regardless, white is always going to be a bit better just because of the reasons we mentioned before. Better control of the center because of this pawn, this active bishop, not to mention the open a file. Yeah, just a bit of a slight edge, which is very common in these Spanish openings. So after knight g3, knight g6, I did read Sam Shanklin's, Grandmaster Sam Shanklin from the US. He did a report on chess.com, and he made an interesting comment here suggesting that knight g6 was an inaccuracy. He suggested a very nice move, bishop d7. The idea is that he wants to trade off this active bishop with queen c8 and bishop e6. The reason why you don't play bishop e6 immediately is because white can simply take, and now these double pawns become targets for the entire game, and you don't want to just compromise your pawn structure like that, which is why you actually take the time to prepare that exchange of bishops. So after knight g3, knight g6, right, so this is potential inaccuracy. Bishop e3, queen e8, rook d1. This is the moment of truth. So we talked about this queen c2 before. C4 was what everyone wanted to be. Everyone wanted to be seen, and I think in Sam's notes, he said that he was in this restaurant with another strong grandmaster, and they seemed to think that black had they were discussing it without the computer engine, and they seemed to think that practically, even though the computer only says 0.5, they were of the opinion that black had some serious practical problems. And to be honest, I was of the same opinion as well. Queen e6 is apparently the move the computer suggests. I would have to say this is a very unnatural move for a human to make. It's true that I can't play c5 immediately because you can simply just take my bishop, but it's very unnatural for you to put the queen into the direct line of the bishop. So after something like, say, a rook b1, then you can play c5. Not the most obvious way to play. It's very committal as well to put the pawn on c5 because now you have this permanent weakness on d5. So in some sense, this would have put a lot of pressure on Magnus to find these accurate moves of queen e6 and then c5, because this is a very natural move for white to play. You're just defending your bishop, and now you're renewing your threat of c5. If you try to, say, drop your bishop back, yeah, apparently c5 is just completely winning. Okay, you have this discovered check because this rook is hanging. So this was the move that should have been played. It wasn't played, and Jan was sort of upset in the press conference afterwards. He knows he missed a chance here, not to win the game, because Magnus is an amazing defender, and there's still so much fight to be left to be played. But he sort of won the opening battle. He got a very, very nice position, probably the nicest position he's had the whole match, in terms of black is just completely passive, and it's white's choice of how to maneuver and increase the pressure. So really a risk-free advantage, and he sort of took it too slow here. He ended up playing rook d1, and that gave Magnus the time he needed to defend, and Magnus defended in an amazing way. Definitely, we can criticize Jan for not playing the most precise move, but it's only because Magnus was able to neutralize the advantage so precisely. But I would say this was probably the biggest moment of the game where he should have went for c4. And then, yeah, Magnus would have had to find this defensive queen e6. So rook d1 was played. Now Magnus, again, he decides to as we talked about, this bishop is so key to trade off, and now he's able to, if white captures, he can recapture it to queen and keep the pawn structure intact. So after bishop e6, bishop a4 was played, and Yan actually decides to go for this endgame, where queens are traded off. So now there's no the kings aren't as in much danger of being checkmated, and now it becomes the endgame phase where the nature of the battle shifts. And even here, white actually has a bit of an edge, but again, Magnus just defended brilliantly. So it looks easy for us watching, but when you're at the board and you have to come up with all these defensive moves, it's not easy, especially because they were all passive moves. As Magnus remarked at the end, he basically made 0 active moves in this game. It was pure defense, and that's psychologically very difficult. You have to, accept that you're not going to win this game. You just have to grovel for a draw. But in a match with the black pieces, it's still a fine result. So one pair of rooks are traded, and rook a6. I was also watching Ivanchuk's Twitch stream, and he praised this move highly, and rightfully so. There was a really nice point to this move, in that let me just try to remember the variation. If what was the variation? Rook a6. Okay, I completely forgot. Okay, anyway, there were some deep points to this rook move. But anyway, Magnus defended very well. Knight e8, king f1, knight f8. So this is like something that you can just sort of click through. Didn't mean to click that much. Sorry about that. You can you can just think that this is an easy draw. Like, this is, everyone's talking about, all the games are draws. No one's putting up any kind of fight, but this was actually not an easy defense at all. Magnus just found an amazing regrouping of his pieces. So you see here the pieces, how they are: the knight on f8, g6, and bishop d6, and now all of these 3 pieces moved to a different square, which is actually something remarkable to think about. He literally moved all 3 pieces to different squares, so it wasn't just a regrouping of one piece, which is often difficult enough to figure out where you should put one piece, but he found the optimal square for all 3 pieces. And so he starts with this move knight e8. That was the first idea. He wanted to bring this knight to d6, and then he brings this knight to f8, which is he wants to bring this knight to e6. So far 2 of the pieces have already moved, and just so you can see, now the 3rd piece is moved. So he's moved all 3 of those pieces from the initial squares that they were on. Really a lot of imagination and positional understanding for him to do that. As they noted in the press conference, there was a lot of talk about why white didn't play h5. The idea is you want to play g6 and kick this annoying knight out. So if you play g6 right away, you lose the pawn. One question is, what if you play h5? Well, the problem with this is that I can actually take either way, but for simplicity, suppose I just take like this. You actually can't take back with the knight, because I take the pawn on e5, and that was actually the point of f3. So all these moves are so deep, and they're simple, but again, like I was saying, when you're at the board, this kind of logic it's easier to just talk about than come up with yourself. So f3, very nice move, protecting the pawn and preparing that variation in case black plays h5. Because if the pawn wasn't on f3, black can recapture this pawn. But now white sets up a healthy pawn, which is also why Magnus decided to play f6. So now if white tries to do the same thing, you can actually recapture with the knight, and you don't need to recapture with the pawn. If you go for something like this and you recapture with the pawn, this knight actually remains passive. So this is some kind of higher level thinking where you're not just counting material or talking about losing by force. You're thinking long term and realizing that you don't want your knight to be on the 8th rank. You want it to be on a more active square. So as Magnus said, he considered this as a positional threat. So he decides to protect the pawn and remove that positional threat. Now, finally, Yan decides to stop h5 with g4. But Magnus, he's ready for that, and he goes for a different plan. He drops the bishop back, and he doesn't even care about kicking out this knight. As he said, he realized that this was a fortress for black, which is ironic because, as he famously said in the 2016 World Chess Championship match after one of the games where he failed to win, he said that he doesn't believe in fortresses. So it's a very famous quote. Us chess players, that's the kind of thing we get excited about. Not like brawls in the stands like maybe you would see in other sports. But we get excited when Magnus, disses fortresses. Clearly here he decides that fortresses do exist, and he had one here. So Magnus, the great player he is not rigid in his thinking. He's open-minded, and he accepts that fortresses do exist, and now he uses them himself, and he used it very brilliantly today. So the game soon petered out to a draw. This was just like a repetition, and yeah, that was the game. So what to say? Just final thoughts about the game is that I think it was actually a brilliant game. It's honestly, people are talking about a draw, but I'm more interested in the quality of chess and the ideas. I actually think the end game was really, really really instructive, as we talked about the regrouping and the protection of these pawns. Going a bit further in the middle game, this was a very instructive moment of how to put pressure on your opponent. You can't wait too long. You got to strike, especially against a guy like Magnus. The opportunities won't come up too often. But again, much easier said than done. It's sitting in that chair is different from sitting in this chair after the game, talking about what he should have done. Also with the help, because I have the help of the engine. And then the other final point was the opening battle. So in World Chess Championship matches, the opening battles are so important. So much is happening behind the scenes. And I would say that Yan has won the opening battle in this game. So what to say is that both sides have, I guess, reason to be happy. Magnus was able to defend, he's able to show his class as a world champion, being able to defend an inferior position brilliantly. And Yan knows that he's getting closer to victory. He got like dream position, as much as you can hope for against one of the best players in the history of chess. And he was upset that he didn't make the most of it, but it's a long match. You gotta put it behind you and understand you'll get more opportunities. Again, I gotta follow it up with easier said than done, but I'm really enjoying the match. I think I don't agree with people talking about it's boring because there's draws. This is the highest level of chess. You can't expect decisive games. your and I think it actually adds to the intrigue and the tension for the games to um, have more draws. It's going to be very exciting to see who makes the first strike, who cracks first under pressure. So maybe the last thing I'll say is predictions for Game 6. Um, it's actually going to start in like 3.5 hours. This is about 4 a.m. here, Eastern time. Uh, I I probably should have went to bed, but I didn't want to keep putting off this first release of the video. I knew I gotta just start it, so I'm really happy that we got it done. Um, but I think I'm just mentioning the time in case I look tired or I sound tired or my analysis seemed weak. We're gonna improve it as time goes on, and yeah, if you like what you saw, please like and subscribe. And leave any comments, uh, feedback, questions, insults. Definitely want to hear from you guys, guys and gals, and yeah. Sorry for prediction for tomorrow, Game 6. I'm gonna say that opening. Well, Magnus play on move one. I'm gonna say that He's gonna play D4 again. He wasn't able to crack the Petrov against Carolina in 2018. He wasn't able to crack the Petrov against Jan in that game. Um, I think he was just curious to see what Jan had prepared, and now as he actually said, he realized that Jan is taking a very classical approach. He said he chose a classical opening. He wasn't surprised by the Petrov because he chose a classical opening. So Magnus is really trying to understand more information. Now that he knows what Jan has done, um, after e4, I'm just trying to think if he's gonna play possibly c4. Um, it's possible actually. We may see c4. Um, we actually may see c4. I'm just gonna go on a limb and say I'm gonna see one c4 tomorrow. I think Magnus has seen enough that he sees that Jan is very prepared in the opening. Um, and I saw if it's not c4, it's going to be d4. I don't think Magnus will play e4 again. And yeah, in terms of result, I think it's always hard to predict the result. I mean, if you predict a draw, you're more likely to be correct. Yeah, I don't want to predict the result, actually. I think it's more interesting to predict the opening. The result, you can sort of predict the result during the game when you see a position. But for now, I won't predict the result because it's just, I think, completely random when we're going to see a win. Um, but actually, you know what? I'm going to predict a Magnus win tomorrow. I'm going to go on a limb and predict a Magnus win. I think that he's gonna sense that Jan is upset about this game. Jan was visibly upset at the press conference and immediately after the game. And I'm gonna be very precise with my predictions. So if I'm right, I'm a genius, and if I'm wrong, well, I think everyone's usually wrong anyway. So I'm gonna say Magnus plays one c4, and he wins the game. Um, he's gonna want a game where it's not so theoretical. Because if you go into your opponent's preparation, then so actually in that case, since he knows what Jan plays as d4, he actually maybe has more of a chance to surprise him with d4, um, because he can try to find something that Jan won't expect because he knows what he's playing. Whereas against c4, it's more of a um, unknown. So he may play c4 later in the match, but okay, I'm gonna change it from one c4 to d4, and I'm gonna say Magnus is gonna try really hard to win. He's gonna try to strike when Jan is psychologically not doing so well, and before the rest day. So that's my prediction: one d4, Magnus win. All right. So see you tomorrow for the Game 6 recap. Thanks so much.